Why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
All right. My name's Phil Marcombe. I'm an author, singer-songwriter, counsellor, and fitness fanatic. I wouldn't say fanatic, but into fitness.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot.
Yeah. You build stuff over the years.
Yeah. So, well, we had a lot of things we wanted to talk about, but what people might not know is that we actually are old friends, very long-term friends. So that's
20 years or more now, isn't it?
Right. So
long time.
It's going to be an interesting one because we already know how fun our conversations can be. So we sort of expect, some good conversations, and hopefully we'll get to know you more. We'll get to see or hear more of what you do and hear more about what you think, what's going on in the world. And there's so much to talk about in this modern time. And where do we start? I think you also said a lot of things that you do, but I heard you say author, musician, singer-songwriter, right? Mm-hmm. So with that stuff, so if you're an author, you must have some books, for example. So what books have you got out?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been busy over the last few years. I've got about, I think, 6 or 7 children's books. They were actually the first books I started writing. A friend of mine's daughter had something called cystic fibrosis, and I started writing a book for her. Oh God, it must be 10, 15 years ago, maybe even longer now. One of the first books I ever wrote, and then I just sort of kept on writing. And I wrote I suppose the most recent children's book I put out is one called The Magical World of Bedtime Stories. My missus, her little boy has got autism, and he doesn't like going to bed at all. So trying to get him to go to sleep is difficult, to say the least. And the book is about how much fun it is to read a bedtime story before you go to sleep, because it's all about adventure. It's all about this, that, and the other. And it kind of sets the imagination up for a really good night's sleep and hopefully some happy dreams.
Right.
And kind of teaches kids about how much fun reading is as well. Because I think a lot of the time now it's just they're either stuck on an iPad or stuck in their mobile phone or something like that. And it doesn't really fire the imagination. Mm. It feeds you, but it doesn't allow you to develop. And I think reading is one of the most important things you can do. I've always loved it since I was a kid. I think that's where my love of writing comes from as well. So I've got, like I say, maybe 6 children's books at the moment, couple of journals. There's a novel, which took me about 5 years to write, called The Dreamer, which is a lot of fun. Adventure, fantasy, starts off in Oxford, ends up on another planet, in another dimension, being attacked by crazy creatures, and there's magic and mystery and epic empires. All of that it's loads of fun. And the most recent addition to the library, I suppose, is a book called No Worries, which is all about it's a little bit of a documentary about my journey from adolescence into adulthood and how I coped with serious depression, anxiety, overcame a lot of psychological issues and things like bullying and abusive stepfather and many other things. It's a little bit of an autobiography in some ways. There's a lot of parts in it. Basically, my childhood from, I'd say, the age of 6, which is where I have some of my earliest memories, up until the age of about 18, when I left home, or got booted out, were some of the most traumatic years of my life. And as such, it took a lot of me studying various forms of therapy and psychology to overcome all of the issues that came with the levels of abuse and trauma that I went through. I studied Virginia satire, conjoint family therapy. I studied Richard Bandler and John Grinder, neurolinguistic programming. I studied psychoanalysis, did various qualifications and what have you to try and understand, but basically used myself as a guinea pig. I wasn't so concerned with the qualifications as I was with actually making a change in myself. And as such, I learned an awful lot of tools of how to create lasting change. And in doing so, managed to change my outlook on life completely. And I think No Worries was, we've both got a friend who is suffering from severe depression. And I wanted to give something back. I wanted to be able to provide people with a really simple, easy to use manual that would be like a how-to guide to get out of depression once and for all. It's one of those books that's got really simple guidelines to follow, psychological tools to use, but explained in really easy to use bite-sized chunks.
So let me ask you, what would you say to, I don't really care about who it was that said it, but it's famously Andrew Tate's method of dealing with depression is to simply say that it doesn't exist, or at least to act in a way that it cannot affect you in the way that some people seem to say, I have depression. You've sort of taken on, you've adopted the thing that was left at the door. You've taken it into your house and it's yours now. Whereas some people see it, depression on the step of the door and say, actually, that's not mine. I'm not having it. And they'll just somehow fight the fall, right? The way you fall into it. What would you say? Is that possible? Is that a respectable way to go about it?
I'd say, yeah, anything is possible. I think when it comes to psychology, the mind is one of the most misunderstood and yet one of the most powerful things that we have available to us. There's a chapter in the book called War Story, and it's about a young guy in the American military who went to the Vietnam War, and he was in the war with 5 comrades of his when they were captured. The Viet Cong took him to a prisoner camp along with his mates or his squad, and they were kept there for 5 years. Over those 5 years, they were beaten on a daily basis, weren't fed very well at all, and over those 5 years, 3 out of the other 5 died. One of them committed suicide, and the other 2 tried to escape and were killed. I think it was 2 years after the war ended that these guys were actually eventually found and admitted that they were still alive and released. And when he was released, he was in remarkably good shape, remarkably eloquent, and psychologically speaking, extremely well balanced. The other two had completely lost it. I mean, one of them ended up in a psychiatric unit where he would be tended to the rest of his life. And the other one wasn't very much better off either. So he was the only one that came out of it okay. Apparently, when he was asked, how did you manage to, how are you so compos mentis after this traumatic experience of being beaten daily for 5 years, stuck in a cramped space? He said the space that they were put in was the size of a bunk. And that was it. They couldn't get out. They couldn't move. So he was pretty much stuck lying down for the majority of 5 years. So the guys, looking at the state of the other guys, they were not only incredibly skinny, but they had sores all over them from being stuck in a consistent position. They were malnourished and they looked absolutely terrible, traumatized beyond belief, 5 years of living hell. Yet somehow this guy came out okay. And when he was asked how he did it, he said he developed an exercise regime that he would do every single day, where he would go through every single muscle in his body and he would tense it incredibly. And then he would release, and then he would tense it, and then he would release. And this is an actual form of static pressure training that you can do anywhere. And it really does work. It works out the body incredibly well. At the same time, psychologically, he decided every mistake he'd ever made in his life, he was going to correct. The thing about the body and the mind is they don't know the difference between imagination and reality, which is why certain forms of therapy work really, really well. So if you imagine that there's a spider on the desk and you imagine it hard enough, your heart rate will increase, you'll begin to perspire, you might get cold sweats, you'll become incredibly nervous, etc., etc. Why? There's nothing there. It's all in your imagination. But if your imagination's that powerful that it can actually make your body think that something real is happening, then what happens if you imagine something positive? What happens if you imagine and go through every mistake that you've ever made in your life, relive those experiences in your imagination, but correct the mistakes, do the right thing? So in essence, he rewrote his own personal history from scratch. It was incredible. It blew my mind when I heard it. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. He actually was quoted as saying he felt more healthy when he came out of the prison camp than he ever had done at any other period in his life. And that just blew my mind. I was like, this guy's a genius. Absolute genius. And it's all about mindset. So what you asked me is, I think it all depends on your mindset, how you look at it. Danny, very good friend of mine, genius psychologist, counselor, you name it. He's got more qualifications than anyone I've ever met in my life. Kind of guy who during COVID decided he wanted to know what the jab was all about. So he went out and got a qualification in epidemiology just to find out what was going on. I was like, wow, this guy, man.
Sweet.
Genius. But one of the first pieces of advice I ever got from him was he turned around to me and he said, be very careful what you pretend to be. Because what you pretend to be for long enough, you will actually become. I believe someone that he knew was pretending to be schizophrenic or something like that in order to elicit benefits of some sort, and to make people feel sorry for her and stuff. And as such, that person eventually, I think 3 to 4 years later, was sectioned for quite a long period of time because, you know, if you pretend something long enough, you become it. So flip that. If you pretend to be happy, to be strong, to be well, to be energetic and not depressed, to be the opposite of what you may feel for long enough, then vice versa, I hope that will actually have an effect. So when you say the Andrew Tate thing about, you know, if you pretend not to be, I think for some people that can work.
Yeah.
I think for other people, having access to different psychological tools really helps.
Yeah, I think it depends as well. Yeah, some people need friends. Some people can't really do with banter, for example, small talk, and it just grinds them wrong, a bit funny, you know, and they're just not interested. But then I think something interesting that Jim Carrey said, with enough exercise, it's just a rough quote, with enough exercise and friends, you might just have a fighting chance to get out of depression.
It's very true. Exercise is one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, time in nature, I think he said, or being outside. But I think that is a massive, for me, it's huge, you know, especially being alone in nature and having some sort of endless schedule of nothingness in front of you so you can be there as long as you want. And that's even better because you never know what you're going to need to think about.
I think that's one of the biggest difficulties of our modern world is the fact that everything has been forcibly overinflated price-wise to the point where just living costs a fortune.
We're getting to £4 for milk now.
I know.
In the current moment of time, it's
nuts, isn't it? It's absolutely nuts. And that's the difficulty, because how do you just be when you're scrabbling to survive? You know, how do you overcome something that you're going through when you don't have time to stop? You don't have time to smell the roses. You don't have time to get out in nature. You don't have time to spend time with friends. You're literally caught in this continuous cycle of must get money in order to survive. Got to pay extortionate rent, then have to pay extortionate council tax on top of that, then have to pay extortionate gas and electric bills, then have to pay all of these different taxes that are placed on top of just about everything else. It becomes astronomical. Even if you're living in incredible moderation, you know, it still gets to the point where you are financially burdened beyond your ability to do anything else.
Yeah. I think you can we can talk about how you could possibly navigate financial difficulties. But I think there's two sides to this, because as a person, if you're a person, you find yourself where you're not able to cover all your costs, for example.
Yeah.
In a general sense, you've accepted to live like that for quite a while, most of the time. So you're going to have to take a good look at that and do something about it, and find a way to shift your circumstances. But if it's a case of you're doing all right, but it's like you can't really move up or put enough in savings to actually do anything, then I think you're going to have to start being smart. You're going to have to start rubbing shoulders with people who are doing the things that you want to do, which I think then begs the question, ask yourself, what is it that you could get into where there's lots of money there, for you to get involved in? So that's always going to be different for each person. Yeah. Some people would be all right taking tips in some special nightclubs. Like you get like 500 quid a night if you do an amazing job. Yeah. Maybe that's you. There's so many ways you can improve your situation, but you have to be in a mental state where you can actually.
That's the big one, I think.
have those thoughts, get yourself to that place.
Yeah, that's almost like the stage after the stage of doing. So I think that with depression, the lethargy, the lack of wanting to do anything is huge. I mean, it's absolutely, if you can't be bothered to get up and make a cup of tea because you just think it's not worth it, then rubbing shoulders with someone who's doing something that may help you get a job to make some money is sort of so far away from that point that you're it's like you've got to deal with the first step. And the first step is doing something, anything. It's so, I've had depression a few times in my life. And the only way to get out of it is to get up and start doing something. Have a routine. A daily routine, I find, is absolutely essential. Without it, you can fall back into depression so easily and so quickly. I mean, if you're a news watcher and you watch what's going on around the world, it's very easy to become disillusioned with life and just say, what's the point?
You could just get depressed just from watching the news.
Easily.
At this stage.
Easily. All the politicians are corrupt. There's wars all over the place. The planet is insanely polluted. All the costs are going through the roof. Half the economies are crashing. All you have to do is just look through all of that and go, what's the point? That's it. I give up. Sack it. Job done.
Yeah. I've been depressed a few times too. So I know what you mean.
And it's that getting over it stage. I think that's why I love No Worries. It's because it's got so many different tools. And you don't have to use all of them. It's like, pick the one that works the best for you. Find what you can do that is easy, simple, and daily. If that is getting up and doing some stretching exercises and then some affirmations, prayer, gratitude. I think gratitude is one of the most important things, because I remember living in Romania for a while in a small place called Arad, and seeing the street kids and how they lived and how they were treated by the police and the people. It was like they were aliens, I was working with a guy called Lee Saville. Amazing guy. I think he's the head of the organization called WAZA there, OAZA. And they basically work with street kids all over Romania. And there's so many of them. It's unbelievable. And he used his own personal finances to buy, I think, like 5 or 6 houses. There's a cafe in the center of town. There's a big farm on the outskirts of the town. Several houses where the kids go to. It always amazed me at how different people are seen from different cultures. Like these kids, they're normal kids. They're human beings. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, pair of ears, eyes, nose, mouth. What set them apart from other people apparently was that they came from a different region of the country and had migrated there, and therefore they weren't liked by the locals nor the police. So they got treated like dirt. I don't understand any of that. We all live on a giant rock surrounded by water. Some people say this piece of rock is mine. Some people say that piece of rock is mine. Some people say, oh, you've got more of a suntan than me. You've got less of a suntan than me. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. We're all on the same rock. Get along, make a difference, help out as much as you can. Otherwise, what's the point in all of it? Just end up bickering and fighting until there's no one left.
Yeah, but I think you could. I mean, I'd like to know what you think about, for example, the concept of tribes, in that you meet people that in your community that you start befriending and maybe working together or whatever, right? You're buying from each other's businesses. And that turns into more than, two people. It's a couple of families, 10 families, whatever. And you finally got a pretty nicely, tightly wound community, and you're all doing great. When an outsider walks in and the intentions, especially if the intentions aren't clear of what that outsider is going to be, is there for, it would only make sense for the protectors of the current group
Status quo.
To be weary of it. To wait and watch for any signs of danger.
I think in a close-knit community, in a tribal sense, I agree with that completely. I think it would be, it would definitely be something that you'd have to assess the threat. So it's actually something that I've been considering myself for quite a long time. Been looking into land and farms and various places around the UK and in other countries as potential places to set up a little community of friends and business partners and stuff like that who would all work together, live in close proximity, cooperate, help each other out, maybe grow different types of food and sort of swap them and stuff like that. And, maybe have some chickens or something like that. I love the idea of being self-sufficient. I love the idea of having no necessity to interact with the rest of the world if I don't want to, but at the same time, being able to do so as needed, So it's not sort of segregating yourself from the world. It's just building your little tribe, building a community and working together to help each other to become much, much more with things like, podcasts, books, talks, therapy, everything.
Yeah, I think it's a very odd thing to have to deal with if you're not really that kind of person. Like, I think I'm like you in that way, in that I don't really get the tribal thing. I've never had a big enough group to be called part of. So for me, I'm like one of the mixed race kids, even though I'm not. Both my parents are specifically from one place, but there's no category for that. There's only probably about 10 of us in the whole country. So anyway, it's more about, so this tribe concept, if people are behaving that way, especially in small town or suburbs in London, as an example, it gets, I remember the Polish and a place in West London where I used to work, and suddenly they were able to come to this country. I can't remember the exact dates, but 90s or 2000s, I can't remember. I think it was 2000s.
I'd say something like that. I've made quite a lot of Polish friends over that period of time.
Yeah. I mean, so that's got nothing to do with Polish people, but...
No, it's just an influx from a specific region, isn't it? I think that can actually come as quite a shock if you are tribally minded. I think my take on it is, like I say, it's often seen as being racist if you don't immediately accept immigration. If you don't immediately turn around and say, oh, well, it's terrible where they've come from, and therefore we should all be completely understanding about the fact that there are people coming in. And I think, absolutely. I think what the Western world has done around the world, destroying countries, bombing cities, flattening towns, dispossessing people from their homes by the tens, if not hundreds of thousands. We've technically created the migrant crisis by destroying people's homes, way of lives, governments, agriculture, everything. So yeah, in a way, the Western world is epically responsible for it. I'd say that was 90% USA and 10% the rest of us. The problem is the migrants are all channeling towards Europe. Now, if Europe is responsible for 10, 20% of the damage, then surely 10, 20% of the immigration should come to Europe and 80% should go to the US, who are predominantly responsible for the amount of damage and wars started consistently throughout different countries.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah. It's the reverse of that, though. That's the problem. It's 80% of the immigration is coming towards Europe. And the European populations are already having a lot of difficulties. Our own governments for quite a number of years now, I'd say a couple of decades, have simply been puppets doing what they're told by big business corporations, outside interests, World Economic Forum, etc., etc., etc. They are and have been completely useless for a very, very long time. And when immigration happens large scale, like with like you say, the Polish came in the 90s, sort of 2000s and stuff. And I've got a lot of friends, or I did back then, who were builders, and they were really, really angry because they were like, "Oh, Polish, they're all taking our jobs. They're doing it for cheaper. We're not getting the work." I think the same thing happened back in the 70s. And my mum was telling me about it. She was saying that sort of the 60s and the 70s and stuff, you had quite a large influx of Indian population and Pakistani population into the UK. And that was resented by an awful lot of people. And I think it's more the fear factor. And when you actually find out that these people are incredibly hardworking, really, really nice people, very, very genuine once you get to know them, that fear factor kind of goes away. But it's like you say, the tribal society, and then suddenly you've got this influx of people from a different country, a different region. They have different culture, different accent, different language. It's quite scary for the tribe, because the tribe either has to accept it and expand and change with that expansion, because new input always creates change within the entire tribe. Or, as happens most of all, they become insular. They isolate themselves. They put the walls up. They put the barriers up, and they demonize what's coming in from the outside. And once you start demonizing it, these people no longer become human. They're just some sort of rampaging horde that's coming in to steal everything that belongs to you.
Yeah, because it's the tax money. That's the thing. If it was just a whole bunch of people that are really nice, a whole bunch of billionaires in the UK are just bringing in hundreds of these people and just looking after them and everything, it's amazing. People are going to have a problem with it.
Yeah.
It's because they're seeing their money go down from taxes, and then they're seeing those taxes being spent. And they're like, I don't like how that money's being spent. Isn't that my money? Don't I have a say? Oh, wait, I don't have a say. Hence the emotions.
You can take it from me, but I'm not allowed to say where any of it goes or what happens to it. Yeah. I get that. I think the big problem with that is that we're living under so many different agendas. Like, you've got the corporate agenda, which is obviously make as much money as we possibly can by any means necessary. They did a psychological study on corporations a while ago to see what type of person a corporation would be if you took it as an entity, as a single entity, and you said, right, what kind of psychological makeup does this person have, this corporation person? And it turns out that the personality type that a corporation has is that of a psychopath, which is a little bit on the scary side. It's like, oh my God. But it is, because it has no qualms about emotion. It has no qualms about crushing people. and throwing them away if they're considered to be no longer of any use. If you're not hitting your quotas, bye-bye. If you're not doing exactly what you're told, when you're told, how you're told, it's very military in these organizations, very hierarchical. If the top man says jump and the little man doesn't jump at the time he's supposed to jump, then you can go and take a running jump. It's just goodbye. And it's psychopathic in the way that it works. And it's very, very dangerous to have this sort of psychopathic corporate control of our society. And over the decades, what's happened is that these donors to various political parties have donated so much that they now control policy. Now, when you have a psychopath controlling policy, what happens to the people? They just get squashed in between.
Yeah, I think if you're lucky enough, you could basically take what's yours in a sense. Like if you've got skills and they're paying big money, those annoying evil corporations.
Well, no, if you can work it.
You know what I mean? If you can, that's one way. You actually I'll just go ahead and take all your money then if I can. You know?
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Some people can do it.
I think it's about developing skill sets as well.
Yeah.
I've always said that it's more important. I don't want to belittle qualifications in any way, because I do think qualifications definitely have a place. It's about learning a certain skill set and then being tested on that skill set to say whether or not you've actually learned about it. So, that is quite important. I think what's more important is to develop actual practical skill sets. Have you ever seen The Island with Bear Grylls?
No.
I used to love watching that. Absolutely brilliant. The reason I loved it was because it put people from sort of office environments and everyday workers, mums, dads, builders, office workers, bloggers, whatever. It would take a group of, I think it started with 24, and then it would put them on this sort of abandoned island in the middle of the South Pacific with some water, a couple of machetes, some cameras, and people who knew how to use them. Obviously, you had to have a camera crew, otherwise no one knew what was going on. And they just left them for 30 days on their Todd. And I loved it because it showed you who had the skill sets to survive and who didn't. I remember this one guy, he made his own fishing rod, made his own line from nets that had washed up on the shore, and made a lure and just sat fishing each day. Now, his skill set was obviously fishing. He loved it. And he caught a shed load, and he fed the whole lot of them. And some of them nearly starved to death. Some of them didn't know how to light a fire. And I just think that in our society, we have gone so far from understanding or having any connection with nature. If you stuck anybody from, Gen Z in the middle of a forest without a mobile phone, without GPS, without any modern technology, and said, survive here for a week, you'd come back to a corpse. Because the majority have absolutely no clue how to survive without Starbucks or without TikTok or without technology.
Or what's worse, they wouldn't want to live in a world without all that stuff.
No.
It's not that I want to live, but I can't figure out how, but I have the will. I'll figure it out. It's not that.
No, it's, I don't have a phone, I'm going to die.
So boring. Oh, God.
I think that's the thing, the boring thing.
Yeah.
See, that drives me nuts. My missus, her kids, one of the boy especially, one of the things that is infuriating is the I'm bored. And it's like, and? So what? Be bored. Where do you think some of the greatest inventions in history have come from? Where do you think imagination comes from? Boredom. I was bored out of my mind as a kid. I had ADHD, a single parent mum who was overworked and had a lot of her own issues to deal with. So I spent a lot of my time on my own. It's very easy to get bored. But I was never bored. I always found things to do. My imagination kept me from being bored. It created entire worlds around me. And I think this is something that the latest generation, I think Gen Z is what they're called, it doesn't have, because of being spoon-fed entertainment 24/7. They don't develop an imagination. And 10 and 11-year-olds sitting there all day long, swiping, stuck on a phone, normally with headphones in so they can block the rest of the world out as well. How damaging is that? And then when they don't have the phone, I'm bored. So, go and play something. Create a game. Use your imagination. Create a world. Look, there's Lego over there. Build something. Make it amazing. I annoyed the hell out of my mum with my imagination when I was a kid. I remember she came in one day and I'd obviously got really, really bored that day. She came in with a bunch of towels. I'll never forget this. She actually dropped the towels. She opened the door, came walking into the bedroom, and there was a cupboard which she used to store stuff in my room. And she opened the cupboard and she went, "Oh my God!" And she just dropped the towels all over the floor. "What have you done now?" And I was like, "Oh crap, I forgot." I'd basically taken one of the drawers of the cupboard out and I'd used paper mache and I'd created this entire scene inside the cupboard. So where there was 2 shelves, now there was just one, with a huge mountainscape with a giant orc general with an axe standing on top. A fight scene down below with a bunch of, I think there was a dwarf, there's a guy with a sword against a load of other orcs rampaging across a river. And there was this little river flowing and I painted it using, PVA glue because it goes clear. And then just done little dots of white on top for the froth. Imagination. Do crazy stuff. Build things. She came home one day and I'd redecorated the entire room using comic books. I had thousands and thousands of comics. I loved reading them. So I got all the ones that I didn't really care about, that were maybe damaged or I didn't want to read them or something like that. And I just pulled them apart, take the not paper clips, staples out of them, pull the comic apart and just paste it onto the wall. And the entire thing was just covered in this mural of comics. It was so colourful. People used to come in and go, "Oh my God, that looks beautiful." My mum hated it, absolutely hated it. "What have you done?" But imagination, feed children's imagination, give them things which make them imagine more, take them to nature and let them chill out and relax and see that you don't need a mobile phone to enjoy yourself. Just take in some of the peace of nature and enjoy it and start resonating with that frequency instead of EMFs and microwave frequencies and all this other crap.
Yeah.
Instant gratification and dopamine hits from mobile phones. Forget it.
That's one of the beautiful things I think about. Well, I think you could say for any sort of shared event like Christmas or, something like that, there's a sort of, everyone knows everyone's sort of wanting to feel the same, things and similar moments being shared all around the world at the same time. It's sort of the same thing in the summer, because when you're on the beach, no one's got their phones out. All the kids are content with sand. My 2 love rock pools.
Yeah.
So whenever we go, we'll run to the edge of where that rock pool is, and then that's it. Sit down the chairs because it's 2 or 3 hours. We're not going to hear from the kids.
Oh,
it's like
playing in rock pools, finding little crabs, and
if we had a house in this spot,
oh my God,
it would be like we've got like a childminder.
Yeah,
you know, would love that.
Don't worry about it.
I think I'm really smart actually. I just had an idea.
Just an idea. Darling, we're moving to the coast. I'm building rock pools in the garden. And I think bringing up kids today is one of the hardest things.
Yeah.
It really is. Because, and this is a huge bugbear of mine, is psychologically, we are damaging children on an epic daily basis simply by not being allowed to instill any kind of discipline whatsoever. We're damaging them epically because what we're telling them from a very young age is there are no consequences to your actions.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
I remember when I was about 4, I reached up to touch the cooker and it had just been on. So I would have severely burnt myself. And my mum slapped me. And I cried. And that little slap and a cry prevented me from putting my hand on a cooker and burning myself really badly. And the next time I went near the cooker, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, don't touch that or mum will slap me. Now, later on, I obviously correlated it with, don't touch that, it's hot, you'll get burnt. But, at the age of 4, you're a little bit, a bit too young to actually understand these things. So, cognitively, you don't put the 2 and 2 together. But subconsciously, you put together, if I go near that, I get a slap. Pain. Okay, not going to do that. But what we've done now is we've said, you're no longer allowed to discipline your children. If you do so, you will be disciplined yourself, which is hilarious. Like, if you discipline your child will either be taken away from you or you will be taken away from your child. And you're like, okay, is this really the best way to bring up children? No, I'm not saying you beat the crap out of your kids because obviously that's terrible. No, you don't, not in the slightest. But a little slap on the backside or slap on the hand or something more than just the apathetic way that we've been told that we can do it now. No, you're not allowed to watch the television anymore. We're going to take away your favorite toy. You're not allowed to look at your mobile phone anymore. I had the same conversation with my missus a little while ago. I turned around to her and I said, did you discipline him for what happened? Oh, yes, I took away his mobile phone. I was like, okay. Did that affect his behavior in any way, shape or form? Not really. Okay. Did he change? No. Did he regret his actions? No. Did he do it again? Yes. So it wasn't discipline then, was it? It had absolutely no effect whatsoever. And this is what we're teaching as we go through, is that you can get by without any reasonable sense of discipline. And as such, we've got a society which is breaking down.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Jordan Peterson said it quite well when he was talking about him being a father of a sort of just over newborn and the kids actually crawling around and trying to touch every little thing.
Oh, yeah.
You're saying no a lot. And if you are not that kind of person normally, and this is your first baby, it's quite an interesting thing that happens. You realize you're putting on this persona for the sake of helping your child grow.
Yeah, because it's not you normally. You're just doing it to make sure that they don't get hurt.
Yeah, and if you're confident knowing that the reason you're saying this to the child is because you love them and you want them to be safe and to know there's limits and stuff like that, things change. So, I mean, I don't really advocate hitting, of course, but there has been 1 or 2 times where I dealt to my daughter the same thing that she dealt to a friend or her sister, because I knew that I was pretty sure at the time that she had never actually felt the thing that she was doing to someone else. It was not part of the information in her brain to even do you not understand that this is pain?
Yeah.
You know,
and you've
this
just
feeling is
inflicted
pain.
this on another person without realizing what it feels like to actually have it done to you. Yeah, no, it's exactly the same. But what we've done is we protect them from consequences now, to the point where they have no understanding that what they're doing inflicts extreme pain on other people, be it physical or mental. And that doesn't work in adulthood. Because the problem is, when you have that kind of upbringing, you become a very, very dysfunctional adult. You either become an adult who has sociopathic tendencies because they have no understanding of other people's pain, nor any care. Or you just can't relate to anybody else because you have no empathy. Empathy is probably one of the most important things that a child can learn, to put themselves in another person's shoes. Or would I like if that happened to me? No, I wouldn't. Would I like if my toys got broken? No. Would I like it if I was pinched or punched? No. Oh, so in that case, if I don't like it, then the other person probably doesn't like it. Ding, beginning of empathy. You know?
That's the problem. It takes like sometimes 8 years or something for the kid to actually show any sort of form of development in that area.
Yeah, it can take a long time, especially if you're handcuffed, like the society is today, from discipline.
Yeah.
Right. I remember, I don't necessarily advocate this, but using myself as a model for it. When I did something that was remarkably wrong, I was chastised for it. I remember, I think I swore at my mum once, and the look on her face, I think I heard one of my friends swear at his mum, and he got away with it. And so I thought, I'll try it with my mum. Yeah, bad idea. Oh my days. I got a slap round the face, and I remember I had a red mark on my face for about 4 or 5 hours afterwards. And yeah, I was crying for a while. It stung. But I tell you what, never, ever after that did I once swear around my mum. Never. And that's all it took. It wasn't a permanent damage. It wasn't something that inflicted terrible trauma. I don't have nightmares or psychological damage because of it. It stopped me from being an horrible little git. Because quite honestly, if she'd have let me get away with swearing at her, I would have continued to do so. Because that's the way children work. They push the boundaries consistently. They will always push to see where their limitations are. But if you don't give them limitations, and they can just consistently get away with more and more and more and more, you create a terrible, terrible adult. Someone who has no idea of consequences, somebody who has no empathy. Psychologically speaking, that's a sociopath. So what are we doing? We're creating a bunch of sociopaths who have no empathy, people who care nothing for other people's feelings, and are very, very self-serving because they get away with what they want, when they want, how they want. It's a terrible way to bring up a child.
Probably end up alone as well, because how can you be with a person like that?
Because you can't, no. Because people will shun somebody like that. All you have to do is look at the child at school who's the bully. 9 times out of 10, the bully is either on their own or only surrounded by those who are sycophants. Those who don't wish to be bullied, so they befriend the bully kind of thing, you know? And still end up getting minorly bullied because of it. Yeah, it's a very lonely life. Why would you bring someone up like that? You bring them into an existence that's fake. Because what you're not showing them is cause and effect. And cause and effect is the most basic rule of life. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Cause, effect. If you walk down the street and punch somebody in the face, all right, it might do nothing. But more than likely, you'll be arrested, charged, and imprisoned, or fined heavily. So childlike behaviour in the adult world does not work.
You'll get violence if you try it with the police. You can't just keep walking away from the police if they're trying to stop you or arrest you.
No,
good luck.
We're going to turn around and, no, go away. You can't do anything to me. Splat.
I've decided that I am not, you can't touch me.
Huh.
Therefore, you're touching me. You know,
No,
there have been
I've
some
grappled
videos.
to the ground and my hands are behind my back.
Yeah.
Something's wrong.
There's some of these entitled teenagers just get their car in America and the police stopping them, and they're clearly pulling procedure on them. Like, all right, let's just do the spiel. All right, get out. Let me see your license and stand there and don't make any noise. And they can't even do that. Because like, you're telling me what to do. I can't take it. No, you're touching me. Don't touch me. Ah! It's like, dude, call my mum.
Yeah. After you've been nicked.
You're an adult now. Sorry.
You're over 18? Oh, wait, it's 21 in America, isn't it?
I think 21 was only for drinking. I think they're still an adult when they're 18.
Is it?
Yeah.
That seems bizarre, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You're an adult, but you're not allowed to drink for another 3 years.
Well, seeing girls at that age drink is it's not a pleasant thing to see.
Oh, yeah, I suppose you're right.
in most senses of the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to be a parent. It's hard to raise a kid, especially, like you said, with all this stuff that's going on now and all the, what you could say is the goalposts have moved so much.
There aren't any
that you
goalposts
can't
anymore.
be
You can't even see them.
You can't be a parent saying, this is my house and my rules. That's like, has anyone said that in the last 20 years? And it actually meant something?
Trudy.
Trudy being a friend of a daughter of one of your friends.
Yeah. That girl, I'm telling you, the kids will not mess with her. And she doesn't have to do anything. She's just got this attitude that just says, don't mess with me. I'm serious. I'm doing this. You're doing that. This is how it's going to go. Do what mummy says. And they just kind of go, yes, mummy. And it's like, wow.
Yeah, strong woman.
Really, really strong, like super strong personality. Do not mess. And I love that. Absolutely love that, because what that's going to do is that's going to mean that these kids are going to be brought up. They're going to go into society and they're going to be able to integrate. They're going to have respect for others. And that's one of the most important things, because when you have respect for somebody else, that respect then gets reciprocated. And when two people mutually respect one another, they can have good, meaningful conversation. You can create good, meaningful friendships. You know? Without respect for somebody else, you come across as either arrogant or rude or just selfish.
And you can sort of not have respect as a part of your software if you weren't raised well. So this is the thing when it comes to the male and female roles within a family. I think it should be respected. I think it should be celebrated. I don't necessarily want to criminalize people who are trying to break the mold or, challenge traditional roles. If they want to do that, do it in an artful way, in a tasteful way,
in a respectful way.
Yeah, and I'm not going to have a problem with it. But if you have a family, if you have that structure already in place and the mother and the father are intact, then I think the child has to witness a healthy male-female dynamic between their parents. And this is the touchy part, because if it's your birth parents,
it's a touchy subject, full stop, to be
honest.
It
is anyway, but let's say first example is you're a child with, you have both your birth parents and they love each other and love you, right? Probably the best case scenario. Then you're gonna be fully open to take in the roles as they're being performed in front of you.
Hence the word role models.
Right. And so there's no issue. There's not going to be an issue with, firstly, you're going to see what part of you came from where. So if you have certain traits that came from your father's side, you're going to witness it. Same with your mother. And that starts to help eliminate when you're trying to figure out who you are and the personality that comes sort of almost separate from that. Because, or at least it's not connected from any evidence. You can't see any evidence why you'd be a certain way. Well, my mum's not like that, my dad's not like that, and none of them are their brothers and sisters or parents. So I wonder if this is like a new thing. This is, part of my personality that didn't come from my parents. So you sort of have that ability to find out who you really are. Well. Yeah, that uniqueness. And that's sort of that's a sort of a birthright that I think people who unfortunately didn't grow up with their birth parents, unfortunately don't get to have. And it's sad. It's just
I think there's a genetic thing. I think there's a lot of traits that I have that my birth father had, but I only met the guy once when I was 3 or 4. Don't really remember it. Apparently he promised to come back in 2 weeks' time, and then I never saw him again in my entire life. Never really spent any time with him, so never had any time for any of his likes and dislikes to rub off on me or to learn anything from him, unfortunately. Seemed like a really cool guy from what I could gather from talking to people who weren't my mum. Although, talking to her when she found out that he'd passed away was enlightening, to say the least. She suddenly opened up about absolutely everything. Oh, he did this, he did that, he had this family, he had that family. I was like, why couldn't you tell me this when he was alive?
I think it's a power thing, I'm guessing.
I think it was a hurt thing. I think he was the love of her life and he left her for someone else. So she felt jaded, she felt injured, slighted. And from that, what's that old adage? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. She hated him for what he did. So therefore his entire memory had to be expunged. And yeah, everyone has their issues. Everyone's human. Everyone goes through things. Everyone has their issues to overcome. I think as you grow into an adult, I think that's one of the greatest lessons you learn is even those you consider to be your heroes are human, have issues, have things that they've overcome, and are not by any means perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned is you can only go so far with respecting a person for the things they are or have done, but you can't, when you cross over the line and either worship them in some way or idolize them to the point of they can do no wrong, or you sort of automatically assume that there must be a good reason behind everything they do, right? Yeah. Once you're at that stage, then you won't be able to really be objective about that person and what you're really getting that's good or not. So as long as you're not actually swept in to that at that level, then you should be able to think for yourself and think, well, what's this person got that I like or appreciate?
Yeah.
And that is the thing that matters. Because if they fall short at any point, or if they suddenly do something tangentially terrible, and you can't justify not liking anything about them anymore. Yeah. You're not in some sort of hell where your world doesn't make sense just because this one person's like messed up.
It's where you find out things about people as well, I think. I think to realize that everybody probably has something that you can like about them as well as something that you don't like about them. I think all of us have things about ourselves that we like and things about ourselves that we don't like, things that we're trying to change. And I think that goes for everybody.
Well, as long as you're still like in a place where you're saying, I'm looking for things to improve about myself.
Absolutely.
That's a beautiful place to be. But I think when you're in a, like, going back to the depression discussion, it's
sure.
You're falling. What's, I think, the most important thing for me anyway, and when I was in a state of depression, was a sense of purpose.
Yeah. I think I was watching Jordan Peterson talking about something like this, and he was saying that without purpose, this is one of the biggest problems with men today, young men and adult men in general, is a lack of purpose, a sense of direction. And there's an old saying, idle hands do the devil's work, which is basically, if you don't have a purpose and something to do, then you'll probably end up doing the wrong thing. I think last week in central London, there was something called a flash mob. But it wasn't a dance flash mob or a nice flash mob. It was a raiding flash mob. It was 150 kids between the age of I think they said 14 and 18. And they just rushed Oxford Street. Right. They just rushed Oxford Street, raided shops, stole perfumes, stole shoes, stole handbags, anything they could get their hands on. You have 150 kids rushing each shop. There's nothing they can do. Security can't stop them. Police can't do anything about it. By the time they turn up, they're gone, and so's all the stuff. Most of them wear masks, so they can't be traced as to who they are. Most of them wear generic clothing, usually black clothing. And it's insane. They have no purpose. They have no guidance. They have no hope for society. They see the people at the top, the so-called politicians, creaming everything they possibly can. All they see is these people technically stealing from the public on a daily basis. For the last 12 years, all I've seen is a party of multimillionaires rinsing the public insanely, stealing everything they can.
Yeah, sort of giving me the thought of, I think there are two main different types of places in the UK. There are places where if we as a family go, we're either going to be one of the families that are there, or we're going to be looked at like we're a strange phenomenon.
Yeah.
Like, oh, a man, woman, children. That's a family. Whoa. And there's just a different, when you're being observed like that. And I genuinely feel responsibility at that time. It's like, okay, they're seeing a real man. Maybe, I don't know when the last time they've seen an actual dad and whatever, but
Yeah.
I'm not dancing around on the roads like an idiot, pretending like I'm not. I'm embodying that responsible dad.
Women who have a father figure who is masculine but respectful and intelligent and manly, they grow up with a very good sense of what a man is. And they normally find a good man to be in a relationship with themselves. Now, I know this is a generalization, But predominantly, when you have a good father figure in your life, you choose a better partner for yourself. Someone who respects you, someone who is sure of themselves and non-abusive. If you have an abusive parent, you tend to pick an abusive partner. It's just, if you look at the statistics, it shows that your childhood and how you're brought up really does have a huge effect on your adulthood and who you choose to be with and how your life progresses. So this is really, really important stuff. And I think what is very troubling about our society at the moment is that a very, 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 very small minority is pushing an agenda onto the majority. And that agenda is damaging to the family unit, damaging to masculinity, damaging to men as a whole. This is very, very dangerous. And people are very scared to talk about this because of this cancel culture crap. And quite frankly, it just gets on my nerves. Because I'm like, I'm sorry, freedom of speech means that you have the right to say what you think. To cancel somebody for saying what they think and what they observe and what they see, especially when what they see and what they observe is men as a whole being demasculated. Wait, what's the word? Emasculated. That's the word. Men across the board are being emasculated. The words that are being used are toxic masculinity, and anything to do with maleness is now seen as arrogant, dangerous, violent, toxic, etc., which is absolute rubbish.
Yeah, if you say the word toxic masculinity to me, I immediately think that there's this man who's beating like his partner and everyone knows about it and no one's doing anything about it. And it's just a normal thing. Yeah. Like he's that crazy that with his masculinity, because what does that mean? It means the thing that male people have or males have is being used to the extent to abuse or hurt someone or cause damage, right? So when you use it, it's just crying wolf if there isn't any damage, if there isn't any abuse. It's not toxic, it's just masculinity. And we don't like that.
Go back to the tribal man. What's his job in the family? Protector. Number one, to protect the family from damage, from negative outside influence, from predators, and from other tribes, villages, what have you, people who might want to take the women. Okay, forward wind that into the modern world. You still need a protector. People's houses are being broken into all the time. Women are being abused all the time. Children are being stolen all the time. That movie, The Sound of Freedom, I think it opened a lot of people's eyes to the fact that there's a huge, huge child trafficking industry in this world, which is incredibly dangerous. Children need a protector. They need a father figure. They need a male role model. They need someone to say, I will protect you from this. Now, if every family has a positive male role model, a positive masculine figure, what you find is that the predominant development of the child is a good one. If you have a man and a woman who have a child and they are psychologically stable and also at peace with their own roles, with who they are, you find a very well-rounded child most of the time. Generally speaking, you can always find, those that don't, but majority speaking, you will find a well-rounded child, psychologically stable, respectful of others, integrates into society well, great imagination, lots of skill sets, and an understanding of who they are. Now nobody seems to know who they are. You can identify as a pencil and start your own pronouns off. What does that mean?
I think it's starting from the place of the endlessness of choice, right? So if you've already been convinced, like, welcome to this world, you are blank. Please choose your color. Please choose your name. Blah, blah, They're like, oh, I'm this for now. Oh, I don't like it anymore. It's because it's there for them to choose. Whereas if you were raised with certain things set in stone, you just don't have a gripe or a possible dysphoria around those things because they're set in stone.
Because it's what you see. What's the old adage? You accept the reality to which you were born into. So if you're born into poverty in a foreign country somewhere, you accept that reality. That is your reality. Until you watch TV, of course. And then you see other possibilities, and then your reality changes because you're like, oh, I want that. That's one of the main reasons that we have a huge degree of immigration from third world countries into first world countries. Because they see the possibilities. Someone tells them the possibilities. It's either in story form or it's in visual form, watching TV or watching from a mobile or something like that. And it's only when you become aware of other possibilities that you then go, ooh, well, I might like to do that instead. And I don't see that as an issue at all. I think life is about exploring new possibilities and working out new things and thinking, oh, I might like to go over there, or I might like to try a different job, or I might try a different route or journey or whatever. But I think what is a little galling at the moment, what's a little difficult to take, is the amount of people, like I say, there is a very, very small minority group pushing a huge agenda onto the entire population. It's like the 0.0001% pushing an agenda onto the 99.999%. Oh, you should all think like this. Oh, you should all do that. Oh, you should all do something completely different than you've been doing since time immemorial. And it's like, why? You see, previously, democracy always works around the majority rule. What the majority votes for is the majority gets. Whereas now it seems as though it's what the minority wants, the majority has to accept. When did that become the norm? That's not democracy. That's dictatorship. Dictatorship is the small minority ruling over the majority. Well, we don't want to live in a dictatorship. That's the whole point of democracy. We talk about exporting democracy to other countries, giving them the opportunity to rule themselves and, have democratically elected leaders from their own people. In principle, it sounds fantastic. I mean, most of the time we're just imposing our own puppet regimes onto other countries and saying, do what we say and give us all your resources. At least that's what the modern Western world seems to have done. Flipping back to what we were saying about masculinity. I do think masculinity is under attack. I do think it is deliberate. I think it is to deliberately break up the family, to destroy the natural unit, because this isn't some religious thing. This is a natural thing. This is the natural world. The natural world has a mother and a father and children, and that's the way it is.
One thing I'd say that if I could give any advice or words of wisdom or whatever to any father that's sort of on the edge with trying to figure out how can they keep living with their spouse or partner. Something that won't make sense. It doesn't seem like it could help, but I think does help. Is firstly, there's always a part of, I believe, of your partner that wants to know that you're happy with them. That as in you're a happy person being around them. And if there's something that they do or whatever that is affecting that, they at some point, whether in front of you or not, will reflect on how their behavior is affecting you if they know about it.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of men will agree, not just men, maybe anyone, but your partner, if your partner has characteristics that you don't particularly appreciate, or they don't let you finish a sentence, for example, you're doing yourself a disservice if you just let it go.
Oh, good, yeah.
But it's very easy.
You bottle it.
Yeah. And if you're in a
dangerous.
relationship, if you're in a day in, day out seeing that person,
No, don't bottle it. Don't bottle it.
it's not, that is so dangerous.
Don't blatantly like hit them with it. But I think there has to be.
You have to find a way to articulate it. It might even be unfortunately in a way that's like trying to trick them into hearing the words. If it's so bad that they won't let you say it, you know?
I think I've come to the conclusion now that if something that you say to someone offends them so badly that they are going to explode and overreact because of it, then they're the wrong person. If they're not listening to what you're saying, if they can't be told something, and if they're not willing to understand that something that they're doing is adversely, detrimentally affecting you consistently, like you say, cutting you off and not letting you finish. See, I couldn't cope with that. For me, if someone keeps cutting me off in the middle of what I'm saying, I used to have a very good friend who I spent an awful lot of time with. And eventually I just had enough because he would consistently cut me off in the middle of what I was saying and talk over the top and not let me finish what I was saying. And so you couldn't have a discussion because I could never get a point across. Halfway through the point, I'd get cut off and then he would just continue pushing his point and agenda. And I'm like, well, no, this isn't reciprocal. This is, again, a dictatorship of one. You want what you want, when you want, how you want, and your point of view is the only point of view that you will accept. And you won't accept my point of view at all. Therefore, I'm out.
That's where I think I braved up at some point. When my partner was saying things or doing things that I knew if it repeats long enough, I'll be out. At least emotionally and everything. I just won't exist in the, you know. I came out to her, put a stop to it, as in not she stopped, but stood up to it and said, I don't know how many more times of this I can take.
Yeah.
Firstly, I feel like running the hell away from you. Like I can't be in this room with you right now. It's unbearable. I need to be honest and genuine about it. Or else it's
the most important thing in a relationship is the honesty and the openness.
Yeah. And you would be surprised, even if it's something that you've let slide for many years, you would be surprised how important how you feel really is. So, and if it's not important, that's even worse.
Do you know how many women go without saying the same thing as well? So many women are afraid that they'll lose their partner, so they don't say to him the things that they truly feel. Because they think if I do, he's going to go, or he's going to get angry or whatever. That in an essence is kind of a little bit toxic, but then it works both ways. So you could say it's toxic femininity as well, when a woman refuses to listen to the man's point of view because of whatever
it would be like, yeah, like if they use their emotions to shut down a conversation, that's so toxic. That's toxic femininity.
Dude,
in action, right?
My mum used to do that all the time. I love discussions. I don't call them arguments. I love discussions. I love talking through interesting subjects and having an intelligent discussion about them. And finding all the different angles. It's like a game of chess, but a really interesting one, because you're talking about a subject. It doesn't matter what that subject is. It can be anything. But if there's two opposing viewpoints, it's great to have a discussion to find out what the other person's point of view is. Well, that way you can either accept that point of view as another part of what you know, or if your point of view is completely contradictory, you can actually put that forwards and see if it holds water as an argument. You couldn't do that with my mum. It was impossible. The second you had a point that was valid or more valid than what she was saying, the waterworks would come out. She'd either start crying or she'd get very angry. Either way, discussion was over. And it's like, that to me is cowardly, incredibly cowardly. Because it means that you can't stand up to the discussion. Your argument falls down and dies. Exactly the same when you're talking over somebody and you're shutting them up and you're refusing. You're a coward. Your argument holds no water. If you cannot listen to what the other person is saying, it means your argument is flawed. You're just not willing to listen to the other person's argument because you know you're wrong. And you know that if you listen long enough, they'll know you're wrong and you'll know you're wrong. Therefore, you'll have to change.
I think if you're in that situation where you would like to deal with it, even though it's so difficult, do the mental exercise on your own, as if the person is in front of you, saying all the things that you don't want to hear. Say it to yourself. That is actually a type of therapy, in my opinion.
Write it down. Write it down. I always advocate writing stuff down, even if it's just, you're jotting down in the notes on your phone. Write it down. Because if it comes to it and you can't actually face the person and say what needs to be said, or they won't listen, send it to them. They can't interrupt something that's being read. I mean, I think my mum actually takes this to genius levels. I remember writing her a letter which expressed all of my feelings. And I expected a reply that was going to come in that was going to be sort of, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you felt this way about this and this and this. What I got was, I said, did you get that letter that I sent you? Oh, yes, that crazy thing about, I don't know, I just didn't bother reading that. I was like, fine. Some people you just can't get through to. In that case, I suggest removing yourself from the situation. I did. And I've never regretted it. There are people, like I say, the friend that I had previously who we were very close, he's no longer my friend. I don't talk to him. I don't see him. I don't spend any time with him. Mainly because if you can't get a word in edgewise, and if you're having a discussion about something and you're being cut off constantly, that person doesn't respect you. And they're incredibly inherently selfish. And if they refuse to change, move away. Pull yourself away from bad situations, bad relationships, bad people. Doesn't matter if they're your mother, your best friend, your partner, it doesn't matter. There are times in relationships when you need to say, we need to part company because this is detrimental to me and all I'm doing is bottling all that emotion. And we know people who have done that and it's damaged them physically. They've ended up with all sorts of complications and problems, and they're now on various forms of medication and stuff because of it. Don't bottle your emotional state because it does damage you physiologically.
Yeah. And I
let it out.
Now say to myself, I owe it to myself and the world to be my best self.
Big time. Big time.
Right? There's no point going halfway with anything. And I've actually had to ask myself a handful of times over my life, have you actually given it a real go? Life or the job or whatever. Have you actually, proven, show yourself what you're made of? Do you even know what you're made of? So that's my challenge to me all the time. But,
have you
do
ever
it.
tried to be your best self?
Yeah.
To overcome the difficulties that you have? to be the best person you can be whenever you're out, to put the most in to what you do at all times. Diligence, I guess. You know, they say, oh, I've done my due diligence. Yeah, all right, be diligent in what you do. Try and make everything that you do. See, something I love about Japanese culture is that they take everything to the nth degree. Everything is done to perfection. Every single thing is perfectly placed. Every food is done with craftsmanship, detail, and skill. Even the napkins, everything is folded beautifully into an origami shape. It's like they decided that they would take every aspect of life to its top aspect, to its perfection. And that to me is pure genius.
It's beautiful.
It's incredible. If you can do that with your life, you know, I don't think we have that influenced upon us enough. I think that is something incredibly important for men, women, children, doesn't matter. If you take everything that you do and do it to the ultimate degree, do everything you do to the best of your ability to do it. It doesn't mean you have to constantly be running around. It doesn't mean that you have to be a genius at everything. It just means do everything well to the highest degree that you can do it, whether it's hoovering, washing up, whatever you do at work, whatever hobbies you may have, whatever skill sets you may use, all of these things, as well as your emotional state, and be true to yourself. To thine own self be true. You have to. Because only then can you truly affect the world in a positive manner. Only then are you truly being who you are supposed to be. You created as you. Why not be you? If something's happening and you dislike it, say something. If the person doesn't acknowledge it and refuses to change, well, maybe you're with the wrong person. Maybe you need to move on, or maybe you don't. Maybe you can compromise and work things out between you. But always be true to yourself. Be the best version of you.
Agreed. We're out of time.
Perfect time to wrap up.
It's been awesome.
Always a pleasure, bro. Always.
Until next time.
Most definitely.